Hey there, hi there, hello there. I'm Les Bowen, and this is episode 2 of Bowen on the Birds, a podcast, which you might have noticed, about the Philadelphia Eagles primarily, but we'll delve into other topics as events warrant. Today, our agree or disagree topic is this new thing about kickoffs. Um, you might have seen last week the NFL instituted a rule. You can call for a fair catch on a kickoff inside the 25, and like magic, the ball will be placed on the 25. The NFL did this in the face of opposition from every single special teams coach in the league, which is kind of unusual. So we're going to talk about that, and basically our agree or disagree is, are we heading toward eliminating kickoffs here altogether, agree or disagree? I kind of think that's the road we're on, but you don't have to agree. And neither does my guest today, Chris Franklin, who will be along in a few minutes. Chris covers the Eagles for NJ.com. I worked with him for a while last season. He's a great fellow and a very good reporter, and he'll have some insights. He has been following the OTAs pretty closely, I think. And next week, in fact, the Eagles will be on the field for the first time together, rookies and vets. They've had kind of a rookie thing previously, but they've not had any vets on the field. So I know he's probably excited about that, and I know fans certainly are. Yeah, there was a long time ago, when the NFL sort of went away for a few months in the offseason. You didn't have everything in your face 24/7, 365, but that day has passed. And, every twitch, tweak, everything that, the room gets filled up with NFL talk and Eagles talk in Philly every day of the year, I think. So among the topics we're going to talk about today, the new quarterbacks coach, Alex Tanney, from the Eagles, a former backup quarterback for several teams, although I was paying pretty close attention to the NFL there for the entire time he was in the NFL. I never saw him play, but he did a little bit here and there, and he certainly learned a lot, I guess, as a backup all those years. And he's now in charge of developing Jalen Hurts, which is kind of a big deal. So we want to talk to Chris about that. We also want to get his views on the safety situation. When I look at social media and things that are written about the Eagles, and people try to talk about what's still out there that might help the Eagles and where they might need to do something going forward. Safety and linebacker are the two positions that get mentioned most. We talked about linebacker a bit last week with my guest, Paul Domowich. I'd kind of like to get into the safety position more this week. They've made several moves there, including drafting a pretty good safety. And, is there a big concern there? Is there something they can do there? I'll also ask Chris about that when he comes on in a few minutes. Interesting thing happened this week, a tryout, and we didn't get any news from it, which usually means they didn't sign the guy. But DJ Fluker, who, despite his name, does not spin records or scratch them, but he does block mostly as a guard through quite a few NFL seasons. He was a first-round draft pick of the San Diego Chargers, and he was one of those guys that his weight was listed at 340, but apparently he got way over that, and he was drafted in 2013. Had a couple good years and then sort of became a journeyman after a few years, and has been out of the league for a couple years now. I think his last gig was a practice squad situation. But apparently, supposedly, I haven't seen him, I haven't weighed him, but he's supposed to have lost 40 pounds and wants to make a comeback with the Eagles. And he played college football at Alabama, like everybody else on the Eagles offense. So, Jeff Stoutland, obviously, big connection there. And, we'll have to see what this intrigues me. Things like this always intrigue me. Stoutland tried this once before with Chance Warmack, another of his former pupils, and that didn't really work out. But Who knows? The Eagles really need like a backup guy who's versatile. And I'm pretty sure Fluker has played every offensive line position except left guard and center. He has been a starting left tackle. He's been a starting right guard. And he's played at right tackle. So, you know, I'd like to see that work out. It'd be a good story. And we got some other stuff as well. I've been asking people on Twitter what they want to know about the Eagles, and some of the things they want to know are kind of unanswerable at this point. But we'll do our best. Anyhow, it might be about time to bring in that esteemed former colleague, Chris Franklin from NJ.com, and see what he's up to today. Assuming we have him ready to go. Maybe we don't. But I did enjoy working with Chris. He's a younger guy than me, different vantage point than I have covering the team, different generation, different background. And I'm really eager to delve into that a little bit. OTAs, most of the league has been doing that. You might have noticed the Eagles have not. Like I said, they're going to be at it next week. But this is kind of the Nick Sirianni approach. He does not want to overwork guys. He does not want to sustain injuries with busy work. And, from a traditionalist standpoint, there's been some second guessing of that. But you have to say last season it worked out darn well for the Eagles. I don't think anybody complains about Nick's approach. He doesn't run a lot of padded practices. Veterans take a lot of days off. He's really into doing the work off the field, staying in shape, but, running around on the practice field. And maybe, I can kind of see how a lot of things have changed in the league. I think you have now all these tools off the field. The playbook isn't a book anymore. It's a tablet with video. And there are ways to teach stuff, interactive things. And, it's a different technological world than it was 20 or 25 years ago when teams used to do a lot more of this busy work on the field. And I think Nick's onto something. I don't think you need to spend a ton of time on the field in the spring. The rookies probably need as much as they can get because they're in new systems and, new rules in some cases. And it's good for them. But Jason Kelce doesn't need to be running around out there, and Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson. No, there's no benefit to them whatsoever. They're staying in shape. They're in the weight room. They're doing their cardio. They don't need to be, blocking rookies and tripping over people and stuff like that at their age. It's an unnecessary risk. And, I think Nick has a good idea from a reporter standpoint now. We used to go to all that stuff. The Eagles used to do every day they could possibly do, and there was access. And you like access if you're a reporter, just even if there isn't anything tremendously dramatic happening, you're in the locker room, you're talking to people, you're getting relationships formed and cultivated. There's a lot less of that now, frankly. Even the teams that are having OTAs now typically aren't having reporters in the locker room the whole time. It's like one day here and one day there. And, it's not what it used to be, but there are good reasons for that. And maybe the players get a little less sick of the reporters as training camp arrives. But there's, something lost and something gained. We're still kind of waiting on Chris Franklin, our esteemed guest. My point on the kickoff rule, I did not see this as the end of the world when they passed this rule last week, even though the special teams coaches did, as I mentioned. My thinking is this. The reason for this is It's not because the NFL hates special teams or special teams coaches, or it wants to take all the fun out of the game or any of that stuff. It's because of concussions, and kickoffs are the number one driver of concussions, at least in recent years. How do you cut down on it? You have to cut down on it, first of all. Every week, I read a lot of stories about the NFL, about players and former players, and I don't go a week without reading one of those stories about some guy who's 50 years old and is having terrible problems, and his wife is worried, and he's, violent and suicidal. You can't have a game where that's the outcome for a significant number of people. You just can't. That's barbarism. That's ridiculous. It's absurd. I think the NFL has done some things to try to get that situation resolved. I'm not sure there is a resolution for it, but I'm willing to try almost anything that makes sense, to bring down concussions. People don't, like kickoffs. Well, that's great. You like kickoffs, but really, if it saves people from early dementia, can you do without it? I guess is my point. The NFL says fair catches will only increase by about 7%, they think, because of this rule tweak. I have no idea. I think they're basing that on what happened when the NCAA did something very similar several years ago. But whether there'll be, whether that'll change what happens in the NFL or not, I don't know. It's a different league. It may not be completely analogous. There are some people that like what the XFL does with lining guys up real close together on the kickoffs, which minimizes the high velocity impacts. I don't know why they wouldn't consider that. Obviously, the rules people know about that innovation, and for whatever reason haven't decided to adopt it. But I'm willing to look at this. It's a one-year trial. It was not passed as a permanent rule, and we'll see what it does. We'll see if it helps. But again, as much as people like to complain about sissification of the game and, why don't they just make it flag football and so on and so forth, something has to change. There has to be a better way to do this than having guys not be able to remember where they live at age 55. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. You can't do it like that. Now, if you have questions for us today, we certainly want to hear those. We have a question here from Jake. Jake wants to know if I have concerns about the Eagles having two new coordinators heading into the season. Well, certainly. Yes, Jake, I do. I think I mentioned last week, this is something Nick Sirianni is going to have to really be on top of. And Nick is still very much an inexperienced NFL coach. And this is a situation he has not come across before in his career. He is a first-time head coach, and now he's lost both the guys he came into the job with, both the guys he picked. Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon are elsewhere coaching their own teams. And while he knows the guys that he's brought in to replace them, Sean Desai on defense and Brian Johnson on offense, it's a different dynamic. It's a different coach's room. And, Shane Steichen was the play caller on offense, which I think is a huge deal. There's a lot of adjusting that Nick Sirianni will have to do, and he'll have to feel his way through adjusting his role to these new personalities and new ways of doing things. And I think that's a major storyline to the Eagles season, really. And I don't think maybe it gets enough attention because it's not one of those things where you can go up to a guy in the locker room and, interview him for 5 minutes and have a good sense of what's different with these coordinators. But I think as we get into certainly training camp and preseason games, that's going to be something that you'll see addressed and something you'll see scrutinized quite a bit. I think we're now ready to bring in that Chris Franklin, and it'll be good to see him. We also have a video ad coming up, and I'm going to take a little break for that, and then maybe we'll have Chris on the other side.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
And we're back. Bowen on the Birds. A beautiful Thursday afternoon in the Philadelphia area. We are going to have Chris Franklin coming in. He assures me of that. He just texted me. So while we await that with bated breath, we'll go back over some of the things we were talking about. There's been a lot of scrutiny about the schedule. We talked about that last week. Even more scrutiny, I think, now that the NFL, among those rules changes last week, they went ahead and did this thing where they can flex games to Thursday night late in the season. I'm surprised that they did that. I don't think anybody likes the idea of flexing a game that was on the schedule for Sunday into Thursday. I know from covering the Eagles that thousands, literally thousands of Eagles fans every weekend go to these games away. You know, like if the Eagles are supposed to play in Dallas or San Francisco, Eagles fans make plans. You saw our ad, they take the trips, you know, and you can't book a trip and then tell the airline and the hotel, hey, they changed the date of the game. I'd like to switch to that. You know, that costs you a ton of money. And I know from having had to do it as a reporter here and there over the years when things happened, you know, back when I was covering hockey, you know, they would, you'd have a flight scheduled for the next day after practice, and then they would decide to change the time of practice, and you weren't going to make that flight, and you'd have to change the flight. And that's real money for people. And apparently they just don't care. As long as TV is happy, the people who actually pay for tickets and follow teams all around the country can just go pound sand. And I don't like that. Don't like it a bit. And we were talking a minute ago about concussions and injuries. And the Thursday games really show some hypocrisy on the part of the league in this regard. There are more injuries when you're trying to play on 3 days rest. I don't know what it does with concussion danger specifically, but I know it certainly doesn't do anything for your knees or your shoulders or that stuff to be playing on 3 days rest. And if you're doing that, you know, they say they're going to give you 28 days notice, but the way NFL teams like to plan and set up their seasons, you know, every minute is scripted many weeks in advance. And I just think, you know, this is throwing a variable in that teams are not going to like. And I just don't see it as a positive at all. So I'm going to check here and see what we're going on with. We've got Chris ready, and he's going to come in and bail me out here very quickly, I hope. There he is.
Hey, you know, I feel like there should be something like Peaches and Herb Reunited or something playing in the background. Right?
And it feels so good.
Yeah, damn right.
Well, this is Chris Franklin from NJ.com, covers the Eagles, does a very good job. Chris, tell our listeners a little bit about how you got into this gig. You were not always a sports writer. You've been down a few roads. Tell everybody about that.
Well, I like to say I took the scenic route around to this job. I actually was starting out as a car salesman. I was doing car salesman, a lot of sales gigs as well too. And all of a sudden, at the same time, I'm playing semi-pro football, and then there's a guy starting a magazine, coaching player, Frank Stevens, and next thing you know, he goes, "Hey, I'm starting this stuff," and so I joined him, and eventually started covering some stuff. I actually met you at one point back when Chip Kelly was there, and then started covering Temple football, and then from there I went to the news side and saw a lot of stuff there on that side, and did that. And next thing you know, opening on the Eagles, and here I am through who could believe almost near 4 seasons now, joining you again, man. It's been a crazy ride.
You really have done some cool things. Now, selling cars, is that a little bit like trying to get an interview from a really reluctant player?
Yeah, and the thing is, I know depending on
You
who
don't
you
have
ask,
any undercoating to sell them or anything.
depending who you ask, I suck at selling cars. That they threw me in the BDC, the business development center. After a while, I'm like, oh yeah. If I was the case, you might see me around here from around, please help me out and stuff like that. But no, it's a lot. It's a lot. It does help. It does teach you some things, like being persistent. Making sure you try to schedule things on time, and then follow up. Like, hey, you want to come in? Hey, you want to come in? Hey, you want to come in? It's one of those things we try to do with players too. So it's
a lot of
it's
persuasion. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Tell me about it. Buy here, please. Though the only good thing is we don't have to tell our stories ahead of time to our other thing. Oh, you have the story thing? Let me shop around somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's always fun, but it's fun.
Good point. Well, since we're talking about players, I didn't prepare you for this question, and you might look askance at it, but you're one of the very few Black reporters who covers the Eagles on a regular basis. Do you think that registers with players, or are you just another hand on the other end of a microphone, stuck in front of a guy's face? Do players sort of respond to that at all, or is that not your experience?
I think so far it's been, some things we can relate on. Some things, like, especially if we come through similar background or anything like that. But I think a lot of times now, I'm glad it's got to that point where they look at us and they go, hey, you know what? Another one of the people. Don't get me wrong. Like, when we start talking, like, hey, there's some hip hop stuff that's out there, or there's certain artists we hear, and like, you hear that. So that stuff is fun to talk about, or I was just mentioned before, a Relentless Family. But I like how it's, it's me and EJ, on the beat, and not a lot of teams have it. So,
I enjoy a good hip hop discussion myself. But,
that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about. I'm waiting for the track to come out, man. I'm waiting for your new thing, the mixtape to come out for you, man. When's it dropping?
Very soon. Very soon. Yeah.
The Hey Doug mix. I'm sitting and waiting for that. But nah, man, it's I wear it with a badge of pride. It's fun. There's a lot of people who worked hard. You look back at Wendell Smith and all those guys, and to where we are today, John Smallwords of the world, Marcus Hayes. When you look at a lot of those guys that laid the foundation, especially in the city, and let's try to carry on that, and hopefully there's more in the future.
Well said. Well said. So our big topic today: agree or disagree that the new kickoff rule is pointing us down the road toward just getting rid of kickoffs altogether. That might be where this all leads to. How do you feel about that? What was your reaction when you saw the rule? Were you surprised they passed it in the face of really spirited opposition from every special teams coach in the league? And, what are your thoughts here?
I really thought it was going to be tabled. They've tabled a lot of this stuff, like major things when it comes to rules. We've heard the onside kick rule get tabled, and to me, I look at that, and that's a equally dangerous play where you have guys even in a shorter distance trying to rush for a ball, even though they say, like, hey, nobody can move until after kick and everything. You still set up a dangerous thing. So I thought, no, there's no way this is getting passed. But when you have every single special teams coordinator saying, no, this is not good. We have kickers coming out saying, nah, this is not really a good move, but no, it is. And I know it's in the vein of player safety. We have to protect the players. We don't want them to get hurt. We know we have the concussion data. Well, you do something like that, Then you have the short weeks that you have on that. Then you say, you know what, you can lessen, get rid, like go back to one side kick, you can get rid of that. But
Yeah.
then, nah, we don't need to do that at all. Can't do that. So I just don't get why they did this. I truly don't.
Mhm. Yeah, it's kind of a half measure. It's not something that by itself is going to make a whole lot of difference, I don't guess. Um, but it's certainly, from a special team standpoint, on the one hand, yes, the special teams coaches are the ones with the expertise here. On the other hand, they're also wanting to protect their jobs. I mean, every time you diminish a special teams aspect of the game, you diminish their importance to what's going on, and you probably provide fewer jobs to guys at the edge of the roster, who can make an impact by running down and hitting somebody on special teams. I'm not sure that outweighs injury and concussion concerns for me. There's a lot of people that when their stronghold is being threatened are going to, yelp about it. But that doesn't mean that you have to, that they're necessarily right, I guess is what I'm saying. In this case, I'm willing to go through a year of this and see what it looks like. What do you think it'll look like? Do you think everything will be fair catch now?
I would too, especially if you do the pop-up kicks, unless you're trying to do a fake where you're trying to throw it on the other side of the field, which good luck trying to do that nowadays. Unless you're doing something like this, why not? You're going to start to 25. It's going to become pedestrian. And if anything, it's just going to give another a chance to just, I'm just going to walk and check something else out. I'll be right back. And you lose that play. And it's interesting you brought up the roster spot because I think it does change your roster construction. You used to have your guys that you knew who could get down the field, get down there quickly, and make a play and impact field position. Now, if you're just going to call fair catch, say if you're at the 15-yard line and you have a really good coverage unit, well, am I going to risk that? Am I going to risk running it? I'm just going to call fair catch. And then, in a way, you're penalizing the kickoff team for doing a good job, getting enough hang time, and having their way to do it. So I look at all that and just like, what's the competition? I don't know what the end game for a competition committee is when it comes to all this. It's unfair to the kickoff teams themselves.
And you also mentioned, you touched upon the fact that we're talking about player safety here at the same time that they, as I was mentioning, they decided to start flexing Thursday night games. And I was looking at that. Let me look in my handy dandy notebook here. How it might affect the Eagles. And Jimmy Kempski did something for Philly Voice, I think, looking at Eagles schedules. It's a late season thing, so it's not going to happen week 2 or anything like that. He was looking at that week 13 49ers game as the most likely game to get flexed. It's obviously a game that the network would love to have on Thursday night. That would leave the Eagles. The Eagles would be hosting that game, so it wouldn't affect anybody's plans for a trip to California. But it would be 4 days after hosting the Bills, which that's kind of a tough little turnaround right there. Bills 49ers, you win both of those, you better win the Super Bowl after that. That's going to be really something if they do that. Obviously, they haven't done it. They were just speculating here. The other game he saw was week 17, again at home against the Cardinals. So despite what I said in my diatribe about, they're screwing up fans' travel, Eagles fans, there shouldn't be any disruption this season if you're making travel plans for the Eagles, because they don't seem to have a late season game that would, really translate into, who knows, how the season's going to go and what games might end up looking interesting that don't look all that interesting right now. But the only other one was week 17 at home against the Cardinals. Jonathan Gannon's much anticipated homecoming. That could be flexed to a Thursday. I don't have a feeling either way about that. But yeah, it's you start moving games around and you play games on Thursdays. It kind of undercuts your image of being terribly concerned about player safety, right?
It really does. And I'm hoping of all hopes, especially for a game like the Eagles 49ers, that the networks now have the ability to basically say, we're keeping this game and you can use anything else right now. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking they're going to try, especially with everything that went on, especially with a rule change and the chirping that's coming from San Francisco right now in regards to the Eagles, what happened in the NFC Championship game. Hoping the network, Fox, I believe has the game. I hope they're going to block that one, just keep that on Sunday for there. And by then the Cardinals could be just god awful. Looking at that roster right now, and a first year head coach, that could be bad. But it's crazy. Like why would you? I know we know why, money grab, but this is bad.
Well, Chris, we're going to go to a break here, and then I hope to talk to you again on the other side. We still have plenty of stuff we need to get through, so let's do that.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
And we're back. I was adjusting my camera there, and the commercial was over. I'll become more professional with this as we go.
Dude, you're doing a good job, man.
Well,
you're doing good.
So I asked on Twitter for some questions that we could mull during this edition. And one of the questions I got was about the safety position. I know the Eagles have made some moves there. Obviously, both their starting safeties from last season have flown the coop. Marcus Epps and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson have left in free agency. They did, they didn't just ignore that. They signed Terrell Edmonds, who's a veteran who's played a lot of games. He's still only 26 years old. He's not a superstar, but he's a solid starting level NFL safety, I think. They drafted Sidney Brown from Illinois. It's a lot sometimes to ask a rookie to start, but he's a guy that's pretty well regarded, I guess, going into all this. They also still have Kayvon Wallace and, of course, Reed Blankenship, who was a great find as an undrafted free agent last year. You know, he played a lot for this team. And, that's undrafted free agents who can really play. That's scouting there. That's doing your work. That used to be something. When I first started covering the Eagles, they had a draft in 2003 where they screwed up pretty much every pick. They didn't get any of the picks really right. The best guy they drafted was L.J. Smith, which was just fine, except they drafted him ahead of Jason Witten, who played the same position. Yep. Their first-round draft pick was Jerome McDougal, who became famous for getting shot. And, it was a terrible draft. But then they signed a bunch of guys after that draft who ended up playing key roles on the team. Jamal Jackson, Quentin Michael, Reno Mahe, Rod Hood. They had a whole bunch. There was another offensive lineman, I forget his name, but they basically redeemed themselves by signing the good players after the draft was over. You don't see much of that, and that's probably not the way it should go. But it's gold when you find a good undrafted free agent. Reed Blankenship looks like, I don't know what his ceiling is. I mean, undrafted guy, you kind of wonder, did you see everything this guy's got in his rookie year, or is he athletic enough to, further develop his game? I don't know who's going to end up starting, but, those are the main guys. I guess there's a guy, Justin Evans. I don't know anything about him, but who's going to start, and do they need to go find somebody else to join this group, Chris?
I think they're going to start with the group that they have right now. And if I'm looking at the starters, I think Reed Blankenship, they've really liked him last year. I mean, even going through training camp, you can see they're really were fond of what he could potentially do in the future. He got pressed into service there, I think, earlier than they really, really wanted to when CJ Gardner-Johnson had that kidney issue. But I think he's going to be one of the starters when he's free. I look at Terrell Edmonds. I think they're going to give it Terrell Edmonds the start just because being a veteran. But I also look at him as a guy who maybe he's one of the guys that they cut right before week one and add to the roster later on, so they won't fully guarantee his deal. So, a guy something like that. I look at Sidney Brown could. I think Sidney can get a lot of play. I think when I look at when you look at what Sean Desai has done back when he was with Chicago, they played a lot of three safety packages, a lot. And granted, they didn't have the cornerback tandem like you have with Darius Slay and James Bradbury. But when you look at how many teams have those athletic tight ends now playing in the slot, when you look at how many teams use running backs now in their routes in the middle of the field, especially say we were talking to 49ers earlier, Christian McCaffrey. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a shutdown, lockdown guy, but you need more athletic guys, especially when playing in like the man-to-man principles in the middle of the field there. So I look at them and I think Sidney's going to play a lot. I wouldn't be surprised, and eventually he becomes a starter. I think he's going to flash a little bit. I mean, I think when you look at the way he closes out on the ball when the ball is in the air as well too, I think he does well. And also, he was a takeaway machine in Illinois. So I look at what he can do, and I think he's going to play a big role. Justin Evans is somebody who I think they had some interest beforehand with the Saints as well too. He can compete. I think he's more of a depth guy as well too. But unless there's an injury, I think they're going to roll with that.
Okay, well that makes sense to me, certainly, Chris. You brought up Sean Desai, and I wanted to get into that a little bit. I haven't met the guy yet. You have. How's the defense going to be different with this guy? Obviously, they didn't change the whole scheme, and I didn't want them to. They've been acquiring players for this scheme for 2 years, and you don't, suddenly decide you're going to be a totally different type of defense just because you got a new coordinator. But they will be different, I hope, in some aspects. And how do you see it? What's up with Sean Desai?
Well, we've had from everything I've heard from players who play from other people as well too. Everybody talks about how bright the guy is, intelligent, and he's really good at communicating why there's a reason for doing that. I mean, it kind of helps that he has a PhD in education, so it kind of helps, being the teaching aspect of that. I'm curious to see what he does in terms of the actual game calling itself and seeing what time to use his coverages. I think that's the big unknown we have right now. His defensive lines have done well. I mean, he got the most out of Robert Quinn back in 2021. He had Khalil Mack as well too, and we saw the seasons that they had. I think Quinn had, I believe, 18 sacks that year, and he knows the defensive line is an important thing. I think it was Seattle and Chicago had more than 45 sacks those years that he was affiliated with them. Now Seattle, he was just the defensive assistant, but you see that they have that impact as well too. So giving this line, I don't think when they look at in terms of coverages and in terms of looks, I think it's going to look very, very similar to what we saw last year. I think he's going to put his little tweaks on there and he won't blitz as much, but you got to hope that the front 4 or 5, depending on what they use, gets pressure. And then it's going to be little tweaks from here on the back end and trying to disguise that stuff. That's going to be important for them.
Very good. Yeah, the thing that I'm looking for is really adaptability, being able to respond to what the offense is doing. I really felt with Jonathan Gannon, you didn't have that. You had very slow recognition, very slow reaction to things. In the Super Bowl, you just saw, him just not able to counteract some very clever things the Chiefs were doing to mess with his safeties. I don't know. Maybe there wasn't a quick fix for that. I'm not an X and O maven, but the fact that he was just totally flat-footed the whole game and it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, I found very frustrating. And I think most fans did. We don't know how Desai is going to do in that kind of situation, but I guess that's our biggest hope, right? Is that this is a more adaptable defense, a defense that can kind of, look at what the offense is doing and make the adjustments that are needed.
And that was a big thing that we heard, especially in the first few years from Nick and the other coaches, is especially early on when you've seen those uncharted plays, those unadaptable plays, how well you react to it. Offensively, you saw the coverages, they did well with that. Defensively, it took some time, and I'm still trying to figure out how, when it came to those motions, how they not read it a lot better. I think that's more on the preparation side when it came to that. But I think I think the Eagles are banking on that Desai being able to see that earlier on, and maybe seeing like having those checks, those automatic checks where you say, hey, you know what? Oh wait, this thing is coming. If we see the same thing like you saw against Chiefs where they're moving that wide receiver, okay, we automatically know what it is right now. It's simpler. We don't have to worry about, okay, well, you have this guy, you have this. It's simplified a little bit more, and then that leads to more success too.
I see. Okay. Alex Tanney, you got to meet him last week, I guess, new quarterbacks coach. I was saying before you came on, I covered the league the whole time he was in it as a quarterback. I don't remember ever seeing him play, but I guess he was there somewhere on the bench wearing a headphones or something. I had no idea he'd been around as many places as he has. I was looking up his bio the other day, and he sat on the bench. He sat on most benches, I think. Yeah, it's incredible. And he was around a lot of guys, a lot of good quarterbacks. And he talked about that, I guess, when you guys got him last week. 8 different teams in 9 years, 12 head coaches. He said he saw so many different philosophies. He was with Eli Manning. He was with Luck. He was with Hasselbeck. He was with McCown, who also was here, of course. What did you make of Alex Tanney when you got to meet him last week?
I think we could be watching either here or there another offensive coordinator. I really think so. I think he's one thing that you really do is something about backup quarterbacks. When you sit and look in there, I mean, they're around the coaches all the time. You see them always in the huddle listening, trying to figure it out. And you're just standing next to the quarterback coach, office coordinator, and they pick up a lot of stuff. And I look at the way that he's thought very highly of. I mean, talking to a couple of people he's thought very highly of. I mean, you look at the way he processes, he thinks, and using all that stuff. And also, I think it helps that he was a former player too, because you can sit there and relate in the QB room. These guys, Tanny has been there before. He's been in the QB rooms everywhere, and he can relate that to say, "Hey, Jalen, I know what you're hearing here. I know you see it here. I've seen this before." It helps that you have a person who sees it, who's experiencing. Hey, this is how such and such beat this. This is how Eli beat this. This is how such and such beat that as well too. And so you have somebody who has that ear who can help out with that. I think that goes a huge way. And I think I wouldn't be surprised especially if the Eagles do well this year, same type of success. Either he becomes the offensive coordinator here because Brian Johnson gets a head coaching job elsewhere, or somebody tries to pluck him and for their teams to be the offensive coordinator. So I think right now, if they do well, you could be seeing some more coaching changes coming up next year. He'll definitely be involved in that search.
That is an interesting topic. I know Brian Johnson is very well thought of, still very inexperienced from an NFL standpoint, but if you have success, I don't think people care too much about that. Johnson, is so close to Jalen Hurts. He's known him all his life. You kind of think that he will be the primary voice for Jalen Hurts, even though Johnson is now the coordinator and not the quarterback's coach. But I guess there's still room for Alex Tanney in there as the day-to-day guy that, is in more close contact with the quarterbacks than Johnson will have a chance to be in this new role. And, I'm real interested to see how that all works out. And everything you said makes sense. It sounds a lot like Doug Peterson, except Doug did have that 1 year where he played for the Eagles. But, Doug spent a lot of time, watching Dan Marino play, watching Brett Favre play, and so on. And that is a good way, I think, to get yourself a good background in NFL offenses. No question about it. Yeah.
And when you look at the way he has success in Florida, you look, I think he put like 500 yards off and something like that. So he's got the way for that. And then I think also by design, when you look at where the Eagles offense did last year, I mean, Brian Johnson still had to say inside the offense, even with Shane being the offensive coordinator, Nick ultimately having his system in here too. So, and the way that this team continually needs to, if they continue to have success, they're going to keep taking the coaches. You need to get those guys in there to get experience, or at least have some semblance of what the job entails that they could be filling in the league. So it's one of those things where you don't want. I know it's over years when they talk about quarterback factory, you got to prepare to be a coaching factory just in case, because if they continue to get plucked, you want guys to fill in easily, and not have to go outside the organization.
Very good point. You're going to run out of those guys eventually, and it's important that when people leave, you don't. Yes, you promote your people from inside, but then you replace those people with really good people. You don't let that part of it sort of atrophy so that you run out of good people to promote. It's great that Alex Tanney, he's actually been here 2 years, I guess. I frankly didn't even remember. I knew he was here last year. I remember he was here the previous year, but it's not like he's coming in from the outside. He knows he was part of the Super Bowl run. He knows what this team does. He knows, who the people are and what the personalities are. And I think that's really key. That was the disconnect that Doug Peterson had with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. Was Doug was all about continuity, and they would look at his replacements for people they wanted out, and they didn't see how things were going to change. To Doug, this was a good thing. He didn't want things to change. He wanted people who knew, what the deal was. And, it was an interesting conflict, and, it ended up with Doug leaving, obviously.
When you going to get your resume?
What's that, Chris?
I was going to say, when are you going to get your resume ready for the OC job? I mean, you should go hire. They're going to run out of coaches. Go for it, man.
Well, sadly, I'm retired, but just to come up a little while earlier, maybe so. We have to go to another ad here, and I hope to get another minute or two with you on the other side of that, Chris, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah, wow, man, good.
All right.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
Hey, Chris, there you are. We are back.
I survived. I'm here.
We're on the other side of the portal here, the transfer portal. DJ Fluker, you probably saw that this week, along with the claim that he had lost 40 pounds, which makes me wonder what he weighed before he lost the 40 pounds. What do you make of this DJ Fluker thing? I see it as a versatile guy who's played a lot of games in the NFL. If he can give them something, I'm not averse to having him around. They're certainly not going to start him anywhere, I wouldn't think. But how do you see it?
I think it's somebody you have a lot of youth right now. I mean, besides Driscoll as a backup, you still have Brett Toad as well too, but there's a lot of youth as well too. And you have Roderick Johnson, and you have Fred Johnson, and all those other guys there in case there's an injury to Mailata. But if the right side goes down, I feel more comfortable with Driscoll being either the right guard or right tackle, but not as the left tackle.
Yes.
If Mailata goes down, I know they use Driscoll there every time. I just feel like he's better suited on the right side. So you got to have an option available there. And I think Fluker could be a guy where I wouldn't be adverse if he's one of those veteran practice squad guys where you keep him up there, just keep him right there around just in case there's an injury. He's been around the league for a little bit. He knows the systems. He knows he'd be around to do the terminology. So I think overall, if you just have him there as a breaking case as emergency,
yeah,
you can do a lot worse. So I think it's not a bad thing. It also doesn't hurt to kick the tires too. Just see what he has and what abilities he can do as well too. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to see what he still has left to tank.
Are we trending toward an all Alabama offense and an all Georgia defense?
Who would have thought if we were watching like the SEC championship games, we'd be pretty much seeing like the Eagles offense and defense?
Paid more attention, obviously, yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy with what they have, but I think I wouldn't. I mean, if it's worked, you keep going back to the well, I guess. I mean, when you look at what these guys have shown, especially those guys on defense. I mean, we know what Jalen and Devonta have done, and when they landed, we see what they've done on offense as well too. When you look at the Georgia defense and the success they had over there, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of similarities between the Georgia defense, the way they played some of their fronts as well, and see it incorporated to what the Eagles do this year. And I think it also is going to help that Nakobe Dean playing the middle linebacker is going to help. He has two defensive tackles, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter in front of him, who he knows where they're going to move, used to that, and they're bigger, so they'll keep him clean and they make big tackles too. So that's going to help him out just a little bit.
Speaking of Jalen Carter, we've talked about his, the risks involved, but also the incredible talent that's obviously there. He's around a lot of Georgia guys, obviously, on this defense. Does that help him? Is that do you think he's going to get the right kind of guidance and the right kind of, do you think that's going to be a big deal in his development, I guess, having these guys from Georgia?
I think that'll help. I think it's going to be part of the puzzle because the fact that you have somebody around your age that you know so well that, hey, this to help you navigate through the NFL process, I think that helps too. But you're going to need Fletcher Cox as well too, and he showed that he can do that role. When you talk to Jordan Davis, he talked about how much Fletch helped him to navigate that first year. So not only do you have his old former teammates that know how to do that, who you can be sure guys like the leaders like Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis, who knows him very well, playing next for so long, they're gonna you gotta pick it up, you gotta play well, and they're gonna keep on him. It also helps to have the OG there, Fletcher Cox, have him sit there and doing that. And I like the mixture that they have of not just the younger but the older players as well too, so he can get from all sides. That coaching staff's gonna be on there. Tracy Rocker's gonna be on. Howie's gonna be on. So yeah, you got everybody in the organization like, hey, listen, keep straight now on. You hope he continues to mature. I mean, he's a young kid. And it's an unfortunate incident that happened, and a very serious one. So you hope he learns from it, matures, and keeps growing and moving on.
Well, I think everybody is, looking at strong SEC programs for top talent, particularly in the early rounds. I think is a pretty good way to go. I mean, there have been some big time busts, just like there are from everywhere, but Howie Roseman spent a lot of years mining the Pac-12 and, the Donnell Pumphreys of this world. And, it's not the same deal. They've made some mistakes looking at what guys did against far inferior competition. It wasn't Pac-12, but Marcus Smith, playing against guys that weren't going to get anywhere near the NFL. It turned out he had no pass rush moves, when they got hold of him, and it's you don't get that with guys who have played in the SEC. You've seen them play against NFL talent, and the question marks are what's inside of them, what they've got to grow, whether they're going to be limited by injury, like a Landon Dickerson. That was the thought when he was drafted. The questions are much more finite. They're not questions, about basic ability usually. So I do like that idea, and I think most people like that idea. Speaking of Eagles and offensive linemen, as we were, Sean Andrews, you had a story about Sean Andrews. Now, this is something that when Sean was with the Eagles, I was very much involved in that. I actually was the guy that did the story from training camp when Sean wasn't with the team. It turned out he was being treated for depression. And I talked to him and got him to talk about that. That was a long time ago, but Sean was an interesting guy. I felt sorry for him when he was a player with the Eagles because he was kind of a big kid, and in some bad ways. I think he was very, very immature. His teammates, because of that immaturity, I don't think he was a popular guy. I don't think he had a lot of friends on the team. He really struggled to fit in with the Eagles. And, he had great talent. Eventually, injuries curtailed that a little bit. The Eagles went to great lengths, I think, to try to smooth that whole thing out. I think the whole thing was signing his brother, which turned out to be a disaster. Stacey Andrews, remember the great quote from
Stacey
Andy
Andrews
Reid,
Day.
"This is Stacey's day," when Andy Reid talked about the organization losing Brian Dawkins. I think that was to try to make Sean more comfortable, to try to get everything out of Sean that you could. And it just wasn't meant to be. It was a guy that was an all-pro, early in his career. People forget that now because of everything that followed. What did you get? What's he doing now? Smoothies? And what's going on with him? How is he? And what were your impressions?
I think sounds like he's in a very, very, very good place right now when we talk to him. He's got his family, he's got 2 kids, married. His son is actually a really good basketball player. He got offers from Ole Miss and I think like 3 other schools as well too. And yeah, he's running of all things is like he's running a smoothie business now. I mean, he was just basically a couple days like this mixing stuff, playing with his Ninja blender, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this works out. So he really got into it. He's working with his business partner, and next thing you know, they had a shop that was already open in Haddonfield, and then Groovy Smoothies, whatever. And now it's down. They're opening another one down in Ocean City, so it's starting to expand a little bit. And I talked to him we talked about a couple of things. Like we talked about, like he said the one thing he wished he had did better with his diet when it came to playing in that. So looking at smoothies, maybe that's the way as well too. If he had that around there, maybe better. And then also his back, that back injury, the one basically forced him to retire. It still messes with him a little bit when it comes to that. But overall, he's in a good spot. He doesn't watch football. He said he doesn't watch football as much as he does anymore. Same with football, with his family. But
where's
I
he
thought it was
living
interesting.
now?
Arkansas. He's still in Arkansas. He's still in there as well too. But I thought it was interesting when he said he mentioned like he did think Jalen Hurts, like he said that was the guy I was willing to he was willing to be blocked for, eager to block for as well. So I thought that was interesting too. So yeah, because considering everything that happened with what he said in 2013, but
yeah, he and Donovan McNabb were not close, but I don't think Sean was really close with anybody. I remember this is a sad little anecdote, but I remember a TV guy telling me that they went out to do something at Sean's house for some story they were doing, and he didn't want him to leave and was saying, "Hey, maybe you guys, maybe you'd like to come back over sometime." The guy was just really lonely and really, you don't really think about stuff like that with players. You don't, but there's like 70 different people. If you with all the practice squad and IR and all that, and there's so many different personalities, and there are people that just, it's like middle school sometimes. It's there are cliques, and there are people who just don't seem to find their place, and it's a part of the game that we don't see a lot because we're not really in there with them when they're making dinner plans and stuff like that. But it can really affect a guy's career, I guess.
And you brought it up. I thought it was interesting too. When you think about these guys, get these big contracts, and they're far away. Sometimes they're far away from home. Like when you look at Arkansas, and you look at trying to get, especially like say if you're a practice squad guy or something like that, like you're trying to find your way. You're in this new city. You're trying to keep this job where everybody's looking at you under a Microsoft magnifying glass, and you try to want to act human for like even little moments and stuff like that. I mean, it's a rough job. It comes thing with like at first like, oh, you're an NFL player. Then it's those little things where you start to look, and it's like it can be rough. It can really truly be rough.
Indeed, it can. Well, I think we've reached the end of our hour here of Bowen on the Birds. Chris, you did a wonderful job helping us out. Maybe you'd like to just take this over, make it Franklin on the Birds, and I'll come.
Nah, I'm not busy enough as it, man. It was fun it was fun reuniting and doing this, man. I mean, miss you, man. It's been a lot of fun
working with you. I really do, and I wish that had worked out, that we could have done it long term. I was very comfortable in that role, but that's how the business goes these days. Maybe we can have you back here again sometime. I'd really like that. We have a lot more we could talk about. We really need to catch up. So good talking to you, and everybody out there. I hope you enjoyed this, and shoot us some questions for next week. I'm Les Bowen, and this was Bowen on the Birds.